Welcome back to the No Name Cinema Society, ladies and gentlemen. It is Monday, April 30th, 2018. It's our Sound Off, our freeform segment, our first Sound Off of our fourth season, and we've got a big one. We got a lot of topics to cover. Hello, everybody. My name is Jonathan Betzler, and usually our first Sound Off of the new year is dedicated to looking back at our big finale episodes, where we did a top 10 of 2017, we did an Oscar preview for 2017, and we did our 1942 in review. A lot of you asked questions based on those shows, and we've got some follow-up and all sorts of stuff to talk about with tonight's show. And of course, perhaps most importantly, if anybody cares, one of us missed their appointment to be on our top 10 of 2017, and they will now give you that information. So we're going to actually do another top 10 right here on this Sound Off. Speaking of which, let's get down to the intros. Let me start with the old standby, the usual. Drunk Davey, how you doing?
Doing well.
And back with us, he was with us on our episode of Indie Spotlight. We talked about the Spectacular Now, but most importantly, he was with us on our 1942 in review. George Pappas is back to do a Sound Off.
Yes, going to be fun to revisit these 1942 movies.
You ready to go freeform with us?
I guess so. We'll see soon enough, won't we?
Speaking of which, it's time for our schedule, starting, of course, with our current feature. We talked about Rampage on Thursday, April 19th. On Monday, April 23rd, a week ago today, George was with us to talk about our Indie Spotlight, The Spectacular Now, starring Miles Teller and Shailene Woodley. And just the other day, this past Thursday, we did our classic movie discussion, Mrs. Miniver, which will play into tonight's top five, our top five films of 1942. And of course, now is the Sound Off. We can move on to his segment, and it's the first one of the new year, ladies and gentlemen. Davey's Diatribe! Davey's embarrassed by my enthusiasm.
If anybody listening on headphones is still able to hear.
So yeah, I'll set it up for you, Davey.
Okay.
Davey, at the last minute, very last minute, pulled out of both our top 10 show and our Oscar preview show. And he's done it every year, and every year, we've done the top tens, but he loves the top tens, don't you, Davey?
Oh yeah, it's the whole reason we do this.
And so he had to miss it. I killed him. We got Ryan to replace him at the last minute, and clearly the show is much better as a result. Davey still needs to let you know what his top 10, the acquiring fans want to know. But before we get to that, Davey, one of the things that you and I always did, compare and contrast, how many movies, did you see the show and see what I announced is how many movies I got to?
Yeah, I think I know I broke 100. I think you beat me this year. I think you did. I wasted a lot of time last year.
So you got let's say 110.
I think I just broke 100, 102, 103, something like that.
Okay. For those that don't remember, I had 113, but I did that in order to beat Davey. Like I raced worrying that I was going to lose, but I did beat Davey, so I'm excited about that. I guess the other thing I want to say, Davey, is for the last 2 years, your number one has been very high on my top 10. You and I have had synergy, at least with your number one, over the last couple of years.
Not this year.
You did watch our top 10, right?
I did. There's a couple on here you'll like, though.
Okay. Take it away, Davey.
Number 10 is Logan. The year started off pretty exciting. There was some interesting movies early in the year, which is a nice change of pace. Logan is just a great story, and Patrick Stewart, awesome in that movie as well.
Logan did come up on one of the other guys' top 10. I think Ryan had it on his top 10.
Was it on his top 10 or was it one that barely missed?
No, it was on his top 10, and it came up a lot in the Oscar preview, if you remember that.
I do. Okay, so number 9 is Raw. This is a French horror film, a cannibal film. It got a lot of press about people passing out at Toronto. I think it's a good movie. I think it's one that you would love, JB. You should definitely check this one out. It's definitely a coming-of-age movie. It's a good story. Number 8, Lady Bird.
What? I can't believe you like Lady Bird.
Saoirse Ronan, I'm really excited to see what she does next. I did not see this film thinking that I was going to love it as much as I did. I saw it at the Angelica in a packed house. I don't know, maybe that helps. It was a lot of fun. I laughed quite a bit.
It was James Monaghan's top film of the year, if you recall.
Oh, great. Number 7, Personal Shopper.
Oh, interesting.
Stewart,
that was on my list. One of the ones I just missed. If I had more time, it would have been like 116, 117, somewhere in there.
Clouds of Souls Maria was my first Olivier Assayas film.
It's the
okay, sure. He and Kristen Stewart work well together. She's really coming into her own as one of the great actresses, I think. I didn't see that coming from her either. Kind of a neat trajectory for her in her career. Number 6, Wind River.
Dude, I haven't seen that, but James and Nate got into an argument about Wind River on the Oscar preview.
I remember them getting back and forth. Do you remember?
He was a fan. James, I believe, thought it was a little hollow. It's amazing.
Yeah,
I haven't seen three of the 5 films in your list. I've not seen. 4 of the film. Lady Bird's the only one I've seen. I boycott Logan, as you may remember.
I do remember that. And I do think that if you ever do get to it, you'll like it.
I loved Wind River.
Did you like Wind River?
Loved it. Yeah.
If you liked Hell or High Water, it does have some of the same vibe, but I think it's possible to like one and not like the other.
He directed this one himself. That's the difference.
It's really well directed. There's some shocking scenes. Some of the action was just shot really, really in a sort of visceral manner, and it was intense. Sticking with that same theme, my next film, my number 5, is Good Time, the Safdie brothers.
James also brought that up on the Oscar preview.
Crazy film. Just a wild ride. Another performance from Pattinson that I thought was just fantastic.
The Twilight people killing your list. Is Anna Kendrick somewhere on here?
This is surprising me as much as anyone.
Pitch Perfect 3, number 4.
No, number 4.
Before you get to number 4, I just want to set 6 movies down now, and I've only seen 1 of them. It's crazy.
Well, you've seen number 4. Number 4 is Get Out. I saw this and Logan back to back. The year's just started off so hot with these 2 movies. We got some filmmakers, some new guys. I'm really excited about seeing what comes next.
It also made both Devin and Ryan's list. It was number 2 for Ryan and number 10 for Devin.
Great. Yeah, number 3, Phantom Thread. Phantom Thread also on your
list. It made all 4 of our list! Yes! It was also my number 3.
Yes.
We have synergy again.
Yes, we do.
We also made Ryan's list and Devin's list, and we'll talk about that shortly. Go ahead.
There's a bit of a backlash, some of the misogynistic overtones of the main character, but he's a horrible guy. Like, he's a horrible person, and it's an amazing character. That's the point. Daniel Day-Lewis is always amazing. This is no exception. Number 2, another movie that you like, Florida Project.
We do have synergy, Davey.
Another one of these young directors just keeps hitting it on the head for me.
And it also made Devin's list, for what it's worth. And it was number 5 or 6 for me, actually. I can't remember. I think it was 6. I was so critical of Tangerine. I was disappointed you weren't on the show so I could surprise you with it.
I kind of remember when I saw it thinking that you would like it. We had a conversation about how there were a lot of movies that you hadn't liked much, really until late in the year, because you saved the indies to the end. I thought that by the time that was done, you'd have a good amount. And I guess that some of that was true.
I loved very few, but Florida Project is one of them.
But I think Sean Brett Baker is just great. And I definitely this movie's very, very different from Tangerine. Definitely possible to love one and hate the other. But I definitely think it shows his range. So
it's time for the drum roll, yeah?
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, David's number 1 movie of 2017.
First, I want to ask, did you try and guess my number 1? Like,
I was running a little late today, and as soon as we started this diatribe, I realized I should have done that, but I'll try and guess right now.
Okay.
And I hadn't put much thought into it, but let's go with 3 Billboards.
Okay, no. I do like 3 Billboards, not a top 10. Number 1 is Killing of a Sacred Deer. I loved this film. I saw it 3 times. It is by far the film that had the biggest effect on me. Edge of my seat. The guy behind me the first time I saw it, the movie was just so utterly painful for him. Just like, oh no, oh no, oh my God. Just a great film.
As you can imagine, I actively avoided that one.
It's a thriller. It's not scary.
I only saw 3 of the 10 or 4 of the 10. Oh, I saw 4 of the 10. Get Out was the other one. So 3 of those would be in my top 11. I didn't see Good Time. I own Good Time. I own a copy of it, but I didn't get to it.
Oh wow, yeah. That's a good one.
I met the Safdie brothers at Sundance and with their film Daddy Longlegs in 2000 and I guess it was January 2010 because I was driving cross country to Los Angeles. And like Greta Gerwig, we didn't get along. I didn't like that film at all. So Good Time is definitely on the bottom of my list because I didn't have any respect for them at that time. George, what are your thoughts on Davey's list? And for what it's George, don't say anything too much about your list because that might come up in our tweet beat.
Killing the Sacred Deer, I avoided seeing as well because I hated The Lobster. I just didn't want to go near another movie directed by the same person. I've seen 6 of the films that you list, and the only one I'm not too crazy about is Logan. Though I'm glad you made mention of Patrick Stewart, because I thought he was great. I didn't hate Logan. I thought it was belabored. He made a big difference in it, so I'm glad that he at least is one of the things that sold the movie for you. Lady Bird, Wind River, Get Out, Phantom Thread, and The Florida Project, which was my favorite movie of the year, actually, are just great films, and I'm glad to see you list them.
Oh, thank you. The deal with Killing of a Sacred Deer, there are some similarities between The Lobster and Killing of a Sacred Deer. He definitely goes with the same cadence with this dialogue. So I mean, if that's something that drives you crazy, definitely you're not going to like Killing of a Sacred Deer. Otherwise, the story is a lot more. It's not as quirky as The Lobster. So it's more of a straight thriller than The Lobster, certainly.
Maybe on your recommendation now, I will watch the film.
Davey's recommendation will not make me watch anything usually, but I am impressed that he used the word cadence. That's kind of a big word for him. His vocabulary is increasing through the show, so that's kind of exciting. Davey, I think we can comment more on your top 10, but it sort of segues into the next segment. Can I just move along?
Definitely.
So let's move along to, ladies and gentlemen, the Tweet Beat. So every year, our first sound off of the new season, there's a lot of questions based around our finale episodes, our top 10, our Oscar preview, and also our 1942 in review. We use this segment, the Tweet Beat, to answer some of your questions. And we've got a lot to cover, all sort of related to our finale episodes. The first thing that we do sort of every year around this time is we have a composite top 10. And here I'm going to show you now our composite top 10. This is a composite top 10 of me, Devin, and Ryan. Phantom Thread is the first movie ever to make all 3 lists in the top 10. And now it has also made Davey's list. So that would be 4 mentions for Phantom Thread. And that's kind of a first ever for that. And that's why it's the #1 composite top 10. Previous leaders of the top 10, Davey's #1 films, because they were also high on my list. Silence last year and Creed the year before that were the winners of the composite top 10. Davey on his list had 2 films in common with me, 3 films in common with Devin, and 3 films in common with Ryan. The record, though, is J Money and Davey had 4 films in common, although they were all sort of on the back end of each of their lists, so it didn't have as much of an impact on the composite top 10. So that's sort of the stats of where we are if you sort of merge all our lists together. So guys, looking at this list, do you guys have any comments on this?
You shocked me with The Foreigner and Jumanji.
That actually was the next question that I was afraid to ask you, but people wanted to know what you thought of my top 10.
I haven't seen The Foreigner.
You haven't seen The Foreigner. I'm surprised. It seems like something you would seek out.
It is. I haven't gotten to it yet. And I haven't seen Donald Cry. The rest of them I've seen. And Jumanji, that's tough, man. I don't know.
Did you not like Jumanji?
No, I guess I enjoyed it. It was fine. Highly forgettable, I thought.
You say that about everything. You saw that James on the Oscar preview was in agreement with me. He thought it was one of the best of the year as well.
That's cool. I'm glad that we got some different stuff in there, and I didn't dislike it.
I understand it's not a film that has the gravitas of like should make a top 10, but it was one of the most well executed films of the year. Like it was the most fun, and it was super smart in what it was trying to do. And so, I mean, it had a lot of stuff in it. And for a action comedy adventure that had its tongue firmly in its cheek, it also had some like depth about growing up and becoming the person you want to be, that things that really touched me. So it worked on many, many different levels. And so in achieving that within the genre that it's trying to, participate in, I think is an achievement. And I don't think because it's, not heavy means that it should be discounted from a top 10 like this.
It's not one that I would pick, but I just like the idea that something like that could make one of our lists. And I mean, like I had some movies that were right on the edge that I thought would have gotten some. Like I was really trying to work Thor into my list. I just couldn't make it happen. But going back to your list, I loved Brigsby Bear. I think Atomic Blonde is definitely a movie that's underrated by a lot of people.
That was another one. I was disappointed you weren't there to react to that. I wanted to hear what you said about that.
I liked it. I liked it a lot. That is a memorable movie to me. With the action scenes in there, they stuck with me. Brigsby Bear, I think, is just neat because it's a different take on kind of a little bit of the Truman Show-ish kind of thing, but definitely different. Spider-Man Homecoming, I thought it was an opportunity to give Michael Keaton his Oscar finally, because he was amazing in that movie.
There was a number of good supporting actor performances this year. The one I thought that should have been nominated that wasn't is Will Poulter in my number 10 film, Detroit, was amazing as well.
Detroit this is a theme of our show where I inform you that Detroit is a straight up horror movie.
I'll buy that, but it was so well done.
It was great. It was great.
Ryan's and Devin's top 10s, they only saw like 30 movies each. I think Devin saw 40. And they sort of went along with what a lot of other people were saying. I do think you're in my top 10s, although there was some similarities, was a little more off the beaten path because we saw more.
It makes it easier. Yeah. I spend the whole year getting ready for that list.
And it's weird is like there are a bunch of movies on my list you haven't seen, and I only saw 4 films on your list out of the 10.
It's incredible how that happens.
We shared 2 movies on the top 10 this year, which is interesting. We have 2 every year, I think, that we share. George, I have a feeling you don't like my top 10 as much.
It's hard to say. I've only seen 2 of them.
Wow. And it's the 2 that made Davey's list, I imagine. Phantom Thread and Florida Project, right?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I try to see everything and I try to see it before critics weigh in. So I sort of, get my own idea about these things before they're whittled down for me by critics and other people's top 10 lists. I have my own idea and I'm not influenced by those people. And I think that's important for me. I was nervous about this, Davey, but it sounds like you don't think I'm as much of a crazy person as other people do.
No, and your 2 number 1 films before this are movies that I liked, and the year before that was Fury that I liked as well.
So The Foreigner will be interesting. That would be a great second run, and it's not an old movie, so it sounds like a second run that you could get into seeing.
I will watch The Foreigner. I've been good about seeing your number 1s at least.
The next question is related to the Oscar preview show, which had Nate and James on it. And the question was, and we sort of get this question a lot, how many of our predictions did we get right? We sort of look back and we worked on 9 categories. Dave, you watched the show, right? The Oscar preview?
Yeah, I did.
Nate got 7 of 9 categories predicted correctly. He missed adapted screenplay. He predicted Molly's Game, when the winner will, of course, be Call Me By Your Name. And he missed supporting actor. He predicted Willem Dafoe, when Sam Rockwell would go on to win. James also had 7 for 9. He also missed supporting actor. He predicted Christopher Plummer for All the Money in the World, when, of course, Sam Rockwell would win. He also missed Best Picture. He predicted Lady Bird would pull off the upset, whereas Shape of Water, of course, was the eventual victor. As far as my predictions, ladies and gentlemen, perfect 9 for 9, kids. So I'm the one you guys need to listen to. Next year's Oscar preview. David, did you have any surprises Oscar night? Anything you didn't see coming?
I would have thought Defoe. Other than that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, you would have been. It was very clear to me Sam Rockwell was going to win. Any surprises for you, George?
No. I guess I just didn't want to see The Shape of Water win Best Picture. I thought it might, so I wasn't shocked that it did.
I was just relieved 3 Billboards didn't win. I mean, it was between those 2.
Fine with that.
I would not have been fine with that. I prefer The Shape of Water marginally. I'm mediocre on both of those films. So, I mean, I knew it was between those 2, so I was relieved to some degree because I knew that my favorite film, Phantom Thread, was not going to win. See if what the next question is. Oh, Davey's going to like this one. I'll let you go first. We get it every year. What was the worst film you saw in 2017, Davey?
Snowman.
A film we almost reviewed but had to cancel. I liked Snowman. Obviously, it wouldn't make a top 25. It certainly wouldn't make a worst of the year.
I like to hate movies that other people liked. That's what's so great about, what's that horrible singing movie?
Lawrence Foster Jenkins on my top 10 and was Davey's worst of the year.
The worst movie I've seen since we started watching this thing. Since the show started. It's the worst.
And I say it's the best film we've ever reviewed on the show. So that's a wide disparity.
It's worse than Hot Pursuit. That's how bad that thing is.
J Money and I never agree on anything, but even J Money liked Lawrence Foster Jenkins. Lawrence Foster Jenkins has the record for the film most mentioned on the show by one of us.
That's my 0.
That's a strange distinction.
Me who loves it.
100, and then Lawrence Foster Jenkins is 0. It's like that's the
And I love it. Davey hates it, so it gets mentioned all the time.
The people in it were so good that I enjoyed it. I would not call it a best or a worst. It was just something that the performances made watching it, okay. But there were things about it that kind of drove me nuts. And because I haven't seen it in a while, I can't really name all of them. I thought Hugh Grant was very, very good in the movie.
I thought Simon Helberg was Oscar worthy.
They were both very, very good. But there were like the transition that Nina Arianda's character went through made no sense. That would have been like having,
I disagree.
Oh no, it made zero sense. Come on.
I disagree, and I thought she particularly helped make it work. With
she's an excellent actress. With something that makes no sense, she will deflect and make herself entertaining enough so that you might not get that the transition she's making makes no sense, but it made. So
you're saying it's smoking mirrors? Well, I disagree. I disagree completely. I think it's a well accomplished transition and perfectly plausible. All right, so he's leaning more towards Davey, it sounds like. But yes, George, you do get to pick a worst movie of the year. Take it away.
Rebel in the Rye, which is about
Salinger, right?
J.D. Salinger, yes. It is so uninteresting. You're just watching a self-conscious art film about arty intellectuals. It never has an interesting moment. And it was so frustrating because it did have a good cast. I guess it's one of the last times we'll see Kevin Spacey. It just bored me to death. I didn't like it at all.
Davey, have you seen Rebel in the Rye?
I haven't seen it.
It's from Danny Strong, the writer of Empire, one of the creators and writers of Empire.
Oh, interesting.
For Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans also know Danny Strong because he's an actor on that show playing Jonathan, who was like Danny Strong's like yay tall. Yeah. And he played a high school student until he was like late 30s. And he was on Buffy the Vampire Slayer as like the kid that gets picked on. And then in season 6, he's actually the villain. Buffy the Vampire Slayer fans, the TV show, they will appreciate the Danny Strong reference. I did not see Rebel in the Rye either. And I doubt you guys have seen my worst film of the year. It's called Just Getting Started from director Ron Shelton. It stars Morgan Freeman and Tommy Lee Jones. And this movie, I don't know if it was a tax write-off. It was just really bad. It had no energy or interest, or everybody was over the top. The comedy was broad and not in a clever way. George, this is more your age group, so I don't know if you saw Just Getting Started.
I beg your pardon. No, I did not. I like both of those actors very much, but they tend to do
money grabs. Yeah, and Renee Russo's in it too, and she's like, first of all, there's no way she would hook up with either of them, but that's beside the point. Davey, I don't suppose you saw Just Getting Started.
No, I didn't. I remember seeing the trailer and thinking, well, that looks awful.
And it was. And I wouldn't see it because of Ron Shelton, but Ron Shelton is not who he was.
If I was going to the theater on the right day, I would have seen it too.
And that's what it was. It was December, and December and January, I was like racing to see everything I could just so I can beat Davey. This idea of the worst is a good segue. More tweet beat questions, but instead of talking about 2017, we're going to move on and talk about our 1942 in review. There it is. So that's what's coming up next, and it's the same question, just related to 1942. So Davey can't answer. George, so you get to go first. What was the worst film you saw out of the films in 1942, and how many did you watch? You wound up like 55?
It was closer to 60 in the end, about 60 films. I believe maybe 59, but no less than that. That's a tough question. There were quite a few I wasn't crazy about, but there was nothing I really hated. But I think the worst that I saw was Rings on Her Fingers. TCM happened to show it at one point, and I thought, oh, great, I'll get to see this after all. It's short, so I'm thinking, it can't be it's a big nothing. It's like watching a movie that goes nowhere. It's a real shame because there are some intriguing elements to its premise, and I love Gene Tierney.
She's top 10 all time for me. She's, oh my God.
Yes, she was incredible. Laird Krieger is in it, Shepard Strudwick, people who are Krieger. There's an interesting premise and it just never quite works. It can't make up its mind what it wants to be. And I think because of the people involved, I thought, this should be charming. This should be a nice way to spend my time. I could have been flossing my teeth. It just wasn't that good,
And she's in another bad movie from 1942, Son of Fury. I thought was pretty bad. It's not my worst, but that was a bad one with Tyrone Power. And one thing we did discuss in the show is how much I hate Tyrone Power. I saw him like 3 or 4 times this year. I'm not a fan of Tyrone Power as an actor. But my worst film is actually a big one, all things considered, and it's one that's sort of still watched every year, and I had not seen it before this show, and having to watch all the films from 1942. And I considered it a gap in my film history knowledge and not having seen this because it has such a famous song, Oscar-winning song. Holiday Inn was by far the worst film I saw of 1942.
Some of that movie is ghastly.
It's offensive in so many places, and not just because of the blackface. We talked a little bit on the show in the amount of douchebags that appeared in films of 1942, and that was sort of a theme. This film has two of them. Like, Fred Astaire is the worst, and Bing Crosby's only slightly better. The love story doesn't make any sense, and the whole concept, the concept was conceived by Irving Berlin of this inn that only opens on holidays and has a song. It seemed like an excuse for Irving Berlin to write a song for each holiday so he can collect the royalties every year on holiday songs.
I can see you picking this. For some reason, I only saw this movie for the first time when we were working on this, even though I'd heard of it for many years. I remember the New York Times used to review White Christmas when it would be shown and talk about it as a weaker version of Holiday Inn.
White Christmas by Michael Curtiz is great.
It's so much better.
It made my top 5 Christmas films in episode 21.4.
I don't know that it would do that for me, but it is certainly, it towers above.
It's so good. I wish the song White Christmas had debuted in White Christmas instead of Holiday Inn. Of course, it also won the Oscar and historically is the biggest selling song of all time. That's why Holiday Inn is famous, but it's terrible as a movie.
It's not a good movie. I'm not going to argue with you on that one.
Maybe, I don't suppose you saw either Rings on Your Fingers or Holiday Inn.
No.
Don't.
I mean, I figured I'd give him a shot. The other thing that we always find interesting that people always ask, George, is people always ask us, who was the hottest man and woman that we saw in the films of 1942, the best looking people. Like for 1966, it was, for me, like Robert Redford in This Property is Condemned. And also, I forget who I had an Israeli actress from Our Man Flint. That was my favorite.
Dalia Mavi?
No, Gita Golan. I'm forgetting her name at the moment. But anyway, that was what I had last year. Who was the best-looking man
and best-looking woman?
In 1942?
The woman, Rita Hayworth.
In You Were Never Lovelier or My Gal Sal?
In everything I saw her in. You Were Never Lovelier, My Gal Sal, and Tales of Manhattan. Rita Hayworth, there's just a reason she has never been forgotten. She's so gorgeous. And just watching her dance is like, Rita Hayworth is one of the greatest sex symbols of all time for a reason. The best looking man, Robert Taylor.
That's who I have. I also have, are we talking about Johnny Eager?
Yeah, Robert Taylor. Sure.
Yeah, I have Robert Taylor as well, and Johnny Eager is the hottest guy I saw all year. Even with the mustache, he exudes.
I know. He's got it all, right? The two people I mentioned, if they were to pop up in today's world, would still be the hottest people.
I did not think he was that special in Camille, quite frankly. But in Johnny Eager, and it wasn't a great performance, but he exudes sexuality.
He really does. The chemistry between him and Lana Turner is pretty incredible.
Lana Turner would probably be my second. I mean, Lana Turner is so gorgeous. So gorgeous. But, I mean, how can I turn down a year that has 4 films with my favorite, most beloved actress of all time? So, of course, my number 1 female is going to be Ginger. Of course, The Major and the Minor, Tales of Manhattan, Once Upon a Honeymoon, Roxy Hart.
I never saw Once Upon a Honeymoon. The other 3, she's just great. And I got to say, she's better in these 3 movies than she was in the movie she won her Oscar for.
Kitty Foyle, I agree. And also in these 4 movies, she looks different in each of them, looks gorgeous in all of them. But also, different. And I think what attracts me most to her is she's so good. She's so talented.
She really
and that's so appealing to me. So it's not just like a beauty crush, it's a talent crush. But she's my all-time favorite actress. So, of course, this was an easy pick for me. I don't think Davey's ever seen a Ginger Rogers film.
No, probably not.
And the final question of the tweet beat, and Davey, you did watch it, right? The show?
Yeah.
What did you think of the show?
Even when I was on those shows, I was just watching them. You always make these movies seem so interesting. I know not to fall for it anymore, but you really do.
Suffice it to say, George, we did Mrs. Miniver last time on our last classic a couple days ago, and Davey was not a huge fan. And now we're going to wrap things up with 1942, tie a bow on it. A lot of people want to ask about the recastings, but the recasting is such a huge segment. So we'll do that with Jim on the next Sound Off in a month or so.
I'll make sure to watch.
There you go. So the films that we wanted to remake of 1942, we'll readdress them. And I think King's Row is one of them you wanted to remake, I believe.
That's
George.
the one I said, yes.
Yeah, so So Jim and I will maybe recast that as well, with modern actors and see what we come up with. So with that in mind, it's time for your favorite segment, the top 5, and we're going to stick with 1942, do the top 5 films of 1942, and George is going to stick around and do his own top 5 as well. Are you excited, George?
Yes.
Dave, are you excited to be an observer?
I am. This is good.
All right. Get your pen and paper ready, Davey, because this is going to be a viewing list for you. So we obviously discussed the films of 1942 in detail on our special. We talked about the films that won the Oscars, what should have won the Oscars, and what should have been nominated. I watched 65. I've since watched 2 more. I watched The Big Street and The Man Who Came to Dinner, so I'm up to 67. George watched 53 at the time of the show, and now he's up to 60. But one thing that we didn't do on the show is our list of top 5 films. So
Right.
you may already know our favorite films of 1942, you don't know our full list. And of course, some of the audience that watched that show isn't going to watch this one, and vice versa. So now George will join me in counting down the top 5 films of 1942. One thing that I talked about on the show is that I was surprised that the films I gravitated to most in 1942 were the comedies. And that's unusual for me, including 4 of my top 5 films are comedies. And it won't be a surprise to George or anyone watched that other show, but Davey might be surprised. So let's start with number 5. And George, you get to go first.
Okay. My 5th choice is the only one of my top 5 that actually was an Oscar nominee. And it is Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons. This is a movie which contrasts America's move from the horse-drawn 19th century to the automated 20th century with the descending fortunes of a once prestigious family. In some ways, you could view this as the most flawed of the nominated films, but not because of the production itself, because of what happened to it in post-production. It does end very abruptly. The last few scenes, they're just very hasty. They're suddenly a movie that's been very carefully paced just starts careening towards an ending that doesn't seem to be coming. But that's because of things that happened out of Orson Welles' hands.
It's true. Like, it's tough to judge it on what it could have been. Like, I feel like we need to judge it on what it is.
But I have to say that even knowing this, every time I watch it, I'm blown away by what's good about it and kind of stunned when it ends so abruptly.
Yeah.
It's beautiful to watch. It reminds me a little thematically, not in terms of film production style, but of Cavalcade, because both films take the changing times and how they affect, an established family situation as times change. That said, Welles really went for something a lot. Cavalcade is probably a better story, but Welles went for something that is just so much more dazzling. The camera work is just stunning. You're taken into a world that's so perfectly recreated for you. And the way in which one bad choice can affect a person's life.
But I will say that on the show, I named Orson Welles.
Yeah.
Jim and I both named Orson Welles Best
You did.
Director of the Year. It was number 6 on my list. So just missed my top 5. For the reasons I alluded to earlier, is I understand what you're saying, and the direction is so ahead of its time, which is why I gave it that particular award.
Yeah.
I also gave it, if I were a one-man Oscar person, it would win Best Cinematography as well, Stanley Cortez's cinematography.
Beautiful.
But I have to judge it on what it is and not what it could have been or should have been. So that's why these other films sort of move ahead of it for me. I'm going to move on to my number 5, which I'm going to do behind me here, and it is Larceny Inc., the big surprise of the whole thing, the whole project. And I came up on the show. It came up on the show because I talked about its leading man, who should have been nominated for an Oscar, and I think should have won. Edward G. Robinson's work in Larceny Inc., I think, is outstanding. It's amazing to me that Gary Cooper has 2 Oscars and Burt Lancaster has 1, and Edward G. Robinson has none. I think I talked a lot about his performance on the show, but now more about the movie itself. I think it's like a pitch perfect merging of Little Caesar and Three's Company, with a little something to say on the nature of the nation's attitude toward criminals and rehabilitation. And that social commentary may work best with the spoonful of sugar that the comedy offers. It's an airtight comedy with pace, cleverness, and originality. It's a modern farce with street smarts that is simultaneously fun and fascinating. Not only does Edward G. Robinson give the best comic performance of his career, his supporting player is terrific as well. Broderick Crawford and Edward Brophy offer just the right balance that something like this needed. It's based on a play that when you make it into a film, it could have fallen flat, but director Lloyd Bacon and his game cast make this film fly. It's one of the most fun movies I'd seen in a long time. If I were a one-man Oscar committee, as I like to say, it would get 3 nominations and it would win Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Actor, as I alluded to earlier. That's how much I liked Larceny Inc. And it was a movie that I did not expect a lot from, but it was the big, every year, like in one of these projects, there's a big surprise. Postcards from the Edge was the big surprise in 1990. Khartoum was the big surprise for 1966. This was the big surprise for me, the one that snuck up on me. You kind of liked it too, didn't you, George?
Liked it very much. A very entertaining film. It was a great surprise. Very funny, very entertaining. I always like Edward G. Robinson. He was on my short list. There were several people that I would have. I thought we were going to get to name a whole, like the 5 people we'd nominate for Best Supporting Actor, and I would have nominated him for Tales of Manhattan for Best Supporting Actor. He had a wonderful year. He's great in both of those films, and is he in something else too? I can't remember, but. He's just a wonderful actor, and it's one of the biggest blights on the Academy that he never received an Academy Award nomination.
Any specific rebuttals on anything I said about it?
No, I genuinely enjoyed that one as much as you did, I think. I don't know if maybe not because I didn't put it in my top 5, but I did enjoy the movie tremendously.
Dave, you excited to see Larceny Inc. someday?
You know it.
You can see Jackie Gleason in it.
Yeah, young Jackie Gleason. He's in 2 films of 1942. This and Orchestra Wild. George, you get to do your number 4.
My number 4 is one that I don't think ever turns up on these lists as one of the best of the year, but it's something I've loved watching for about 20 years now. And it is This Gun for Hire, which is directed by Frank Tuttle, based on a story by Graham Greene. Just a fun film noir film that is taut and suspenseful and very well filmed. It is really fast. It is gorgeous to look at. It has 2 stars who will never be known as threats to Tracy and Hepburn, but who had their own chemistry. And this is the first of their 3 films together, Veronica Lake and Alan Ladd.
I like their work in The Blue Dahlia.
I do too. They're also in another film from 1942, The Glass Key. They're a great team. They aren't particularly good individually, but they are a great team. And what can I tell you? I have a very good time with it.
What's amazing to me, George, is this did not come up on the show at all, this film. Like, not even a glimmer of it. Like, I don't think it got mentioned at all. So that's fascinating. And what's even worse or better or interesting is I didn't see it. It's one of the ones that I did not see. You know what I saw because I sent you the list of what I saw and what dates I saw them. So you may already know this, but I did not see This Gun for Hire. I missed it.
It is a really terrific movie. And I'm a member of a lot of Facebook groups of film noir fans, and everybody loves it.
It's interesting that I feel almost ashamed that I missed one.
Oh, I really like This Gun for Hire. I think you'll like it too. I really do.
And it seems like a Davey film too, to some degree.
It does. I was thinking that too.
But my number 4, I think also might be a Davey film, and I know it's one that you liked, and I'm a little surprised it didn't make your top 10 because it's one that you mentioned should have won the Oscar for Best Picture over The Magnificent Ambersons. So I'm surprised that you maybe you changed your mind. But I've got The 49th Parallel. It was released in the U.S. under the title The Invaders. I mentioned the director, Michael Powell, on the show before in reference to my number 6 favorite film of all time, Black Narcissus, which would come 5 years later. I think one of the things that makes this film special is it shows how you can make a film that is essentially propaganda into something that's artful and nuanced. It puts Mrs. Miniver in its place in that regard. One of the ways it achieves this is by following the Nazis and not Americans or Canadians. It follows the Nazis as they try to escape Canada. Some of them are even sympathetic, and even the ones who aren't are still 3-dimensional. And I think that says something about Eric Portman's masterful performance as the highest ranking Nazi. You almost get the best representation for what could have happened to many Germans in the 30s. Brainwashed by a madman so thoroughly with a false sense of national pride that he loses all sense of self. Does that sound familiar, Southern United States? The dueling speeches in the farmhouse meeting is among the most riveting moments I watched all year in a movie from 1942 or 2017, quite frankly. And most importantly, the filmmaking is just better in the 49th Parallel. I had Michael Powell as my second favorite director of the year for his work in this. Storytelling techniques that feel very modern and would influence, among others, Martin Scorsese. Each scene is blocked, choreographed, and shot with confidence and detail years ahead of its time. Behind Mrs. Miniver, it's probably the film that came up the most in our discussion in the 1942 show, and rightfully so. It's a masterpiece. If I were a one-man nominating committee, it would get the most nominations, 6. Best score, cinematography, adapted screenplay, director, actor for Eric Portman, and best picture. It wouldn't win anything. And but also Jim felt like it should have got a best supporting actor nomination for Niall McGuinness. I think all of us loved the movie. It came up several times in the show. Yeah. George, you definitely said it should have won Best Picture over Magnum and Ambersons. Sounds like you flip-flopped a little bit.
Yeah, I guess I did. I loved The 49th Parallel. I thought it was a terrific film. I just didn't feel compelled to watch it again after we had done the show. And I just sat down and thought, well, now what were my favorite 5? Because I wasn't even thinking I was going to have to do that. Really, all of the 5 I'm mentioning to you, I've been watching for years. So
yeah. Davey, we talked about it a lot in the show, so you probably remember hearing about it, and I just talked about it more. Does it sound compelling at all?
No, like I said, you always make them sound compelling.
That doesn't mean they would be to Davey. All right, so that means we're going to move on to numero tres. Number 3, George, take it away.
Okay, now all through our 1942 talk, I mentioned that there were 3 movies that I just couldn't decide which was the better of them. In many categories, they kept popping up for me. So these 3, you could change the order of it any time for me. But right now, my number 3 is going to be To Be or Not to Be.
Jim's number 1 film.
Yes, it was. Very witty and poignant comedy about a Polish acting company which uses its talents to fight off the invading Nazis. There are many very funny moments all throughout the film. Yet they never let you forget the danger that these people are at the risk of facing. You could take the laughs out. The story would still be holding you. The cast is terrific. Jack Benny in a rare opportunity to carry a film, and he actually does do it. Carry might be too strong a word because the ensemble cast is all just so excellent.
He's really good, though. Like, I have him as a top 5 actor. I think he should have been nominated for Best Actor. He's really good.
It's a wonderful cast. It recreates the other world so well. It's told so wittily. I mean, at the very beginning, we actually think we're watching Hitler on the streets of Poland for a second there, It's just filled with surprises and twists and turns, none of which is far-fetched, all of which makes sense. Take the threat that they're facing very seriously. It's a swan song for someone who would have gone on to have a career that would have lasted.
George is referring to Carol Lombard, who tragically died January 16th, 1942 in a plane crash over Nevada, I think it was.
Coming back from, she was raising money for war bonds.
This was her last film, and yes. Jim said she should have been a Best Actress nominee.
She was excellent.
It's a tough year. Jim liked her a lot, but Jim only saw 24 films, so.
It's not the sort of thing that would make I'm sure it wouldn't make you argue if she had been nominated.
She was good, but I mean, like, there's so many good female performances this year.
Yes. But all the same, that was a big loss to the country, to the film community, and she would have gone on.
And to Clark Gable.
Oh yes, he was never really the same after that. That's a corny thing to say, but he wasn't.
It came up a lot in the show. Again, it was Jim's favorite. And now I imagine Davey hasn't seen it, but Davey, you might have seen the remake directed by Mel Brooks in 1983.
No, sorry. That does sound interesting though.
It was worth a shot. I thought I'd get, since there's a remake, I thought I would give him a chance here. But the fun little tidbit here is George has seen it many times over the years. But for the 1942 show, we actually saw it together with the groupie at Film Forum in June. So now for my number 3, and we discussed it on the show in terms of its screenplay and its 2 lead performances both came up. And for 2 people that would become lovers after doing a movie together, I've got Woman of the Year as my number 3 movie of 1942. And of course, I'm talking about Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn as the 2 actors that would become lovers. I feel like Woman of the Year is a nearly perfect picture. It's less about feminism to me than it is about work-life balance, as I said on the show. It deals with sexuality with tact, but in an honest and unafraid manner. It doesn't hurt that the chemistry between the two is electric, probably top 3 screen chemistry all time. George Stevens does what a director should do, puts his actors in situations to succeed, creating a light tone with a breezy pace, but not so light that it has no impact. And George Stevens comes up all the time as another one of my favorite directors. He manages the delicate balance between comedy, drama, and social commentary without ever feeling didactic. If I were a one-man Oscar nominating committee, it would have 5 Oscar nominations: Best Editing, Best Original Screenplay, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Picture, and it would win for Best Original Screenplay, which it did. It actually did win the Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. So they got that one right. I think you're a fan of this one as well, George. Woman of the Year.
Oh, yeah. It's an excellent movie. Terrific cast, terrific screenplay, and you actually described it perfectly. Well, no one was thinking in terms of being a feminist in 1942. What was the term you used?
Work-life balance.
Yeah, it really does that very well, and no other film at the time was doing that.
Katharine Hepburn's character is sort of a modern-day feminist. I watched it with somebody, and they were starting to get worried during the kitchen scene that they were going to undercut that she was a strong woman. She was trying to change herself for her man, and they were worried that that was the message, but it wasn't. It does it like a rope-a-dope on that. I don't think it undercuts the feminist element of it, but I think the general point is not that to take away that she's a strong woman, but to not bury herself so much in that she doesn't allow herself to have a life. That was more what it was about. And that was interesting to me from a modern day prism. Davey, I assume, has not seen that, but I'm sure you've heard of Tracy and Hepburn.
Yeah, I have.
All right, number 2, George.
My number 2 film is Sullivan's Travels, which came up quite a bit when we did the 1942 night.
I thought it was going to be your number 1. All right, this is another twist.
Well, yeah, I could see why you would say that. I just love this film. I think it cuts to the importance of entertainment in all of our lives, gives us a little wake-up call to not take ourselves too seriously. I think it is a gem of a film. I always have a good time watching it. It is orchestrated really well by Preston Sturges as a director and written beautifully. It's such a witty screenplay and a clever one. And I, again, may be the only person on earth that would put 2 Veronica Lake movies in a top 5 list of any year. She was never known for being a great actress of any kind.
And I had her in my top 10 for another film altogether.
I Married a Witch, right?
Yeah.
She had a great year. She really did.
But everyone says she was like an awful bitch.
Terrible to work with. When Frederick March has to carry her in I Married a Witch, she put bricks in her robe pocket because she didn't like him. Raymond Chandler called her Veronica Lake.
Frederick March called the movie midway through production, I Married a Bitch.
You can't pick up on that at all watching her. She's so charming.
Another really good-looking woman from 1942.
Gorgeous. And in Sullivan's Travels, she was 8 months pregnant when the film wrapped. She gave birth 4 weeks later. I've never seen a pregnancy hidden better on camera. That's kind of amazing.
They focused on her legs, I think, was the difference. She wasn't gaining weight in her hot legs. So
I guess so.
Sullivan's Travels came up a lot on the show, and I named it as the one that should have been nominated for Best Original Screenplay. I still think Woman of the Year should have won, but I had it as should have been nominated. And the screenplay is its strength. With Magnificent Ambersons, potentially the most important film historically from 1942.
Interesting.
In terms of cinema history and its legacy. But I had issues with it. Its tone jumps around a lot. It's an episodic nature, slapstick and melodrama. I don't think he's, as a director, blends it as well as somebody like George Stevens, for example, in the film I just mentioned, Woman of the Year. We talked about it a lot on the film. I like the film. I respect the film. It's one of those, like Bonnie and Clyde, one of those that I respect but don't really love. Sullivan's Travels is kind of a big one, Davey. It's a possibility you've seen it.
Nope.
My number 2 is the one film that I like that George does not. And when I first did the show, when I told George about the 1942 thing, the first thing he said to me is, there's one film from that year that I think is highly overrated, and it's my number 2 film of the year. It came up on the show previously when I talked about my top 5 musical biopics of all time in episode 38.4. I think it was number 2 on that list. It's also a top 100 film for me. I think it is actually number 100. Granted, I grew up with the film, so maybe I have a nostalgic factor, but I watched it again recently. Yankee Doodle Dandy is my number 2 film of 1942. I used to rewatch this film over and over as a kid, experiencing it, memorizing the songs, singing along, rooting for George M. Cohan, and feeling inspired afterwards. Still, I think it takes great storytelling to evoke that kind of a response, regardless of what age I first experienced it. I do think it's a near perfect screenplay, covering all the points in Cohan's life and career without anything feeling wanting. It also amazingly never feels sprawling like so many biopics can. I feel like it gives you just enough and moves on without sacrificing information or emotion or detail. And largely, a lot of that is thanks to the original clever, efficient, and effective montage sequences, which were directed separately. The film is directed by Michael Curtiz, but the montage sequences were directed by Don Siegel, who Davey might know as being the director of Dirty Harry, which is a film we talked about in episode 17.3.
And Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
15.3. And in 1956, he did Invasion of the Body Snatchers as well. So I feel like this is a shining example of what a biopic can be or could have been. And there's another film from 1942 that failed, a film called My Cal Sal, which dealt with a songwriter from a similar time period. That was just, like, to me, a terrible film. If I Were One Man, Oscar nominating committee would have 4 nominations, including Best Editing, Best Supporting Actor, Best Actor, and Best Picture. As much as I like the film, I don't think it would have won in any of those categories if I were a one-man committee. But obviously, I like the film a lot. It's my number 2 film in 1942. George, you can rebut.
Yeah, okay, I will. I have to say that when I watched it again for the 1942 night, I liked it more than I had remembered when I'd seen it the one time many years before. I don't love the movie, but I do enjoy it. I think it would certainly make a top 20 for me. It does feature a terrific lead performance by one of the greatest of all Hollywood stars.
My little fun tidbit about that is in 1926, a young James Cagney heard out about an opening in George M. Cohan's touring company, and he went in to audition for him, and Cohan turned him down flat. And when he walked away, he told his assistant, "Can't have that guy. He looks too much like me."
Yeah, that's good
16
one.
years later, Jimmy Cagney would win an Oscar for playing him, and I think that's kind of a fun story. Our number 2s are sort of similar. Like you respect mine, but don't love it, and that's how I feel sort of about Sullivan's Travel. So it's a musical, so I'm not even going to bother Davey in asking if he's actually seen it.
It sounds like torture.
All right, we're going to do the number 1s here, folks. Number 1 films of 1942. George, I thought it would be Sullivan's Travel, so I really don't know where you're going to go here. You know where I'm going to go. I don't know where you're going to go.
Well, this is the one of the 3 movies that I said I really was dying to get in, give some nominations to when we did the 1942 night, but I never did mention it by name. And as I said, these 3, I could reverse the order of at any time. But I'm going with a movie I'm sure you like, but would never rank this highly. Saboteur. I love Saboteur.
And just so Davey knows, Saboteur is Hitchcock's film from 1942.
Yes. This is just a great story. It takes the typical Hitchcock theme of a wrong man being falsely accused, having to go on the run to prove his innocence. We've seen it in many Hitchcock films. We've already seen it in the 39 Steps at this point. In dealing with spies on American soil, it's a little similar to Hitchcock's Foreign Correspondent of 2 years earlier, which was about spies on European soil. And it has a fun and crazy ending atop the Statue of Liberty, which calls to mind what Hitchcock would do many years later in North by Northwest atop Mount Rushmore. Now, I make these comparisons because unlike the 3 films I mentioned, this one is rarely listed as a Hitchcock classic. I think it is so damn entertaining. Dorothy Parker is one of the screenwriters. There are so many little interludes in it that are unexpected and very funny. The love story is really charming. The story is just delicious. I've watched it for years and years and years, and I'm going to watch it for years and years and years. If there's one thing I can say that might have made it better, Hitchcock said this about Foreign Correspondent as well. The stars are not great. They're not bad. They're good.
They're not good.
They don't have the charisma that stars of this era had. I mentioned North by Northwest, which had...
and yet Robert Cummings was in everything. Like, he was in so much.
And he's good.
I'd give him a C-. I feel like he's somewhat below average, but
I know what you mean. I mean, someone else would have had a lot more fun with this and let you have some laughs along the way. He doesn't really do that.
That was the key drawback for the film for me, because I would actually it was in my top 10 for a while, and it sort of got bumped out towards the end. I think it landed, if I went that far, to 12 or 13 or something. It's really good, though. And I had Hitchcock as one of my top 5 directors. I have Otto Kruger.
We both mentioned Otto Kruger. I know that I would like to have seen him get a Best Supporting Actor nomination.
Yeah, he's terrific. Special effects are sort of ahead of their time in many ways. as you would expect for Hitchcock. It's very, very good. There's so many great performances in Hitchcock films.
They're a little flat.
Yeah.
It's not that anything they do is flat. People who really just bring themselves full force lift everything they do along with them, and these two don't do that.
It was a little bit of the drawback for the film for me. I mean, and it wasn't as good of a story as North by Northwest or Vertigo. You know what I mean? Like it, and Hitchcock usually elevates the story, and here he did elevate it, but not to that higher echelon. It's an achievement for sure, though. So I have no bones with you picking it at all. I was worried, and I'm very relieved now. I think you might probably remember where I'm going with my number one. Don't give it away, but do you remember, George?
No.
Don't say it. You don't remember. Okay. Davey, do you remember what my number one film from that show was? You probably don't, right?
No.
This movie came up on in the show before on episode 11.1. Sorry, it was 12.1, where we did a top 5 female-driven comedies, and this was my number one there as well.
Okay.
And it's another top 100 film for me, and it's elevated by the a tour de force performance of my favorite actress of all time. My favorite film is Billy Wilder's first film as a director, The Major and the Minor, in which Ginger Rogers plays a 20-something woman who disguises herself as a 12-year-old in order to get half fare in the train, and then she winds up at a boys' military academy, and all sorts of mayhem ensues. The log line sounds a little kooky, but it's so well executed. One of the sharpest and most inventive comedies I've ever seen. The tour de force performance by Ginger Rogers makes it one of the best films of all time for me. As only Billy Wilder screenplays can do, it pokes fun at gender politics, sexuality, and generational differences while never slowing down so that you'd notice it right away. The result is a film that's breezy, fun, witty, intelligent, and one of my all-time favorites. I can't overstate the importance of Ginger Rogers' performance. It's a comic performance, yes, but she plays the 20-something-year-old, she plays the 12-year-old. At one point, she plays her own mother in the film, and she also plays her adversary over the phone to someone else. It's just terrific, entertaining, and smart. If I were one-man nominating committee, it would be 3 Oscar nominations, only 3, but it would win Best Actress and Best Picture. I actually have it listed as one of the top 10 female performances of all time. Jim, I don't think it's seen it, but you were a fan, as I recall, George.
Oh, yes. She is that good. I think when you asked us to pick an actress who hadn't been nominated that should have been, didn't I mention her? I think I did.
We both had her as our should have been nominated.
It's a real head scratcher that she didn't get a nomination for that.
It was a very serious year. I mean, like I like the comedies, and a lot of these didn't get the nomination.
But Rosalind Russell over her?
Oh, Rosalind Russell was a mistake. I disliked that film intensely. My sister Eileen.
It's really bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the only other excuse I can give is Ginger Rogers had won 2 years earlier.
Yeah, that's true.
For a lesser film that we agree is a lesser film directed from a lesser director. So yeah, The Major and the Minor is my number one film in 1942.
Yeah.
Davey, remember me bringing it up in the past?
No, I do remember you bringing it up in the past. I do. Yeah.
Thought for a second he'd have a little more to say on that, but no, he does not. Because he's David.
I gotta be honest, the premise sounds a little rough, man.
I understand that thought process, but it overcomes that. If you don't believe me, ask George here.
I thought it was excellent. I mean, Billy Wilder is one of the greatest American
yes,
American via Austrian filmmakers of our generation, and before the generation before, I guess you'd say. But he got off to a rollicking start with this. It's just a great film. I love it.
The fact that it's Billy Wilder, George even likes it. Doesn't that give it some little credence, Davey?
What do you mean George even likes it? I like plenty of movies.
But I'm saying, like, my recommendation alone will not do anything for Davey. Yeah. But if it's you and
me, definitely George carries more water. There's no question about that.
No, Davey, I really think you'll like it. It's a real find. I mean, it's just a gem.
It all depends on Davey's mood, I think. Like, Davey needs to buy in early. Like, if he's in early, then I think he's along for the ride. If he's going in being like, this sounds stupid, if he's got any reticence at all, you definitely need to swallow the pill of disbelief. But once you're in, you're in.
I think sometimes it's the other way around, though. If I go in expecting nothing, it can work out better.
I would worry that the premise that I explained would scare you off, or that would be in the back of your mind, and you'd be looking for trouble.
It's not as bad a premise as so-and-so can't sing, but she's singing.
Oh, my God. Let's get off Lawrence Foster Jenkins already. Oh. All right, guys. So we're going to wrap up the sound off here. Do you guys have any way you want to summarize the evening? Anything you want to say to wrap things up, Davey?
No, I had a lot of fun. Thanks.
So you will next see us on May 17th, Thursday, May 17th, we're going to start our 48th series of episodes with the film Breaking In. And I have no idea what that's about, but you're going to see it anyway. And we're going to see it and we're going to review it on Thursday, May 17th. And that's going to kick off our next series of episodes. So stay tuned for all the information. And don't forget, David didn't say it this time, so I will subscribe to the channel. Make it happen, everybody. Right, Davey?
Yeah, I mean, come on. There are 100 people like the Facebook page and 55 have subscribed. That doesn't make any sense.
We're up to 56 now, so chugging along. Hopefully, by the time we get to 100, Davey will drink again on the show like he did on Rampage. So with that said, ladies and gentlemen, this meeting of the No Name Cinema Society is adjourned.